Chapter 3. Teeth, 5, jive, on the third stroke. Hey, why ain't I under yet? Better warn the weasel not to start pulling just yet. Steve opened his eyes. If this is dreaming, thought Steve, I haven't missed much. The view reminded him of Dartmoor, where he used to spend his school holidays camping and walking, only this place was flat for miles, with no inviting toes to clamber up or run down. Behind him the plain stretched out as far as he could see, so for want of anything better to do, he started to walk towards the mountains. After a few minutes he looked at his watch, or he tried to, but on raising his arm all he saw was a bare wrist. He was greatly troubled. It wasn't so much the lack of a watch that bothered him, nor the fact that the rest of his body was, on inspection, entirely bare, but the troublesome actuality that the body in question wasn't the same one he'd grown up in. In fact, it was borderline as to whether it was Homo sapiens or not, what with the long hair on the legs and the excessive number of flattened toes. The blue colour didn't help either. For some reason he calmed down. Out of curiosity, he tried to yell out, "Anyone there?" and was intrigued by the guttural explosion that forced its way out of his mouth, past his fangs, and into the leaden air. Fangs? That would startle a good doctor. He realised with some surprise that he must still be in the chair with Dr. Sells tapping away like a sculptor producing a miniature statue out of a chip of marble. He was vaguely uncomfortable about the fact that he'd forgotten so easily who he really was, and tried to shut his eyes to block out the flat dullness of wherever he was, and was gripped by the vertigo as he had been back in his bedroom. This time he got the impression of falling down a well by starlight, a fast fading sprinkling of light and the infinite void waiting. The landscape looked much more inviting after that. If this was a gas-induced dream, he'd sit it out. Half an hour wasn't so long, but it felt like much more than that by the time he decided to get up and explore some more. Maybe his sense of time had gone the way of his skin colour, and for that matter the rest of his body, which had acquired several disquieting features which would surprise any osteopath, ear, nose and throat specialist or proctologist. Not that there seemed to be anybody, or indeed anybody, else in the place, although once he caught what seemed to be a flash of motion in the sky. He squinted up into the grey light. The ship that had sped by looked more like fish than birds. He must have been dreaming. That thought made him laugh. He wandered over to one of the boulders with the vague intention of climbing up it and looking for something, anything, on the horizon. The surface caught his eyes. Like granite it was, composed of a myriad tiny facets of crystal, white, orange, black, grey. Unlike granite, some of these were quite large and faintly grooved. These bigger lumps were uniformly white, and they puzzled him. It wasn't until he came across one that was protruding from the rest of the rock, pure white with a blunt point, that he twigged. Teeth! The rocks were granite, he was sure of that from the mica, feldspar and quartz he recognised. Any Dartmoor bog trotter knew granite, as the city dwellers recognised concrete, but with an uneven sprinkling of teeth stirred in, like peanuts in a chocolate bar. Again, he thought of the weasel's constant invectives against refined sugar when he was young, again reminded himself that somewhere his real body was supine and slightly more gummy. But granite couldn't have teeth in it. Long-distance school geography lessons sprang to mind. Born of elementary fire, hot lava from the Earth's core slowly cooling under tremendous pressure with crystals of hard rock forming over centuries, any organic matter would be fried, powdered and assimilated in minutes. It was, he reminded himself, a dream. One which would offend doctors, geologists and dentists in equal measure, but still a dream. It had to have something to do with being in such a dream, he thought, but he felt curiously elated. He felt plain curious, too. He was looking forward to the next discovery, the next fact to fall out of this strange place. Again, he felt a little disquiet about the ease with which he'd forgotten about his real status as an office worker in Plymouth, but then that place had its fair share of grey skies and boredom, too. He hunted around in the grass until he found a small lump of rock. Odd. He looked around. The scattering of the stuff was fairly even as far as he could see. What on earth, or wherever, he reminded himself, could have caused this place to be like this? He imagined great glaciers slowly melting, dropping rocks as they retreated down the vast gouge they in earlier youth had carved, but that wouldn't explain the flatness of the place. Glaciated valleys, once more these geography lessons with Rowley Jones surfaced after a decade submerged, were U-shaped. This was plain. This blue and hairy body must belong to a blue and hairy geologist, he thought. He raised the rock above his head and brought it down hard on a large boulder he'd been examining. The shock jarred his hand, but cracked off a small amount of the boulder's surface. He looked at the spray of chips that littered the grass. They were sharp, like flakes from the surface of a chalk ice. The image of an ice cream, he couldn't remember the name, with small fragments of nut in the hard chocolate layer around the soft cream inside, came to mind, and on a whim he nibbled at one of the chips with his recently enlarged canines. It tasted like a rock. He looked at the place on the boulder where the chips came from, expecting to see more of the same, perhaps a little more colourful and sharp. Instead, he saw a smooth skin, black as the night, underneath which must have been just a shell of toothed rock. He prodded it with one ridiculously long finger, without a fingernail. For a moment he couldn't decide whether it was sillier to have a finger without a fingernail or one with. Why did humans have fingernails anyway? He resolved to find out when he was back in the real, he nearly thought other, world, and it gave way a little like the skin on a dead pig. Down at his feet he found a particularly long hard shard of rock skin. With a roar he jabbed it into the gap on the boulder as hard as he could. This was, he discovered, very hard, and the skin broke. A gush of cold brown liquid shot out and over his body. He stood there for a moment, surprised as the sticky coolness trickled down, matting the fine hair which covered him. He poked the same finger into the new gash, expecting to find a void. Instead, he encountered a soft, sludgy gunk. It was very cold. He pulled his finger out, and for some reason an image of his boss came to mind, startled by the unexpected feelings. Again, on an impulse, he licked the finger. Chocolate ice cream. He pulled at the rock shell around the gap, removing scabs of the stuff and widening the hole until he could get a fist in. One part of his mind stood back, aghast, as a feeding frenzy took over, and he pulled, tugged, hit at the shell, reducing it to fragments and revealing an interior entirely composed of ice cream. With a whoop, he started to scoop the stuff into his mouth, not minding whether it ran down his chin, onto his chest, caking him with stickiness. No chocolates. No chocolates. Bad for the teeth. Huh? Where did the voice come from? He looked up and realized he was cold, shivering, and standing in a spreading pool of molten ice cream. He was very, very messy. It'll ruin your teeth. Not good at all. Was that? That was the weasel. Steve, you mustn't eat so much chocolate. Steve, you have to wake up to the fact that your teeth must last you the rest of your life. Steve, wake up. Steve. He shook his head and suddenly felt very cold indeed. The grey of the sky lightened to orange, to white, and he shivered. Steve, wake up. He blinked and felt the ground somersault like a funfair ride. He tumbled, was lying down. He was on the couch looking up at Dr. Sells. Steve, can you hear me? Why was his mouth so horrible? Yeah, yes, I can hear you. I've been dreaming, I think. Don't talk. Take deep breaths. Do you feel okay? Stupid dentist. How can I tell you if I can't talk? Uh-huh. Good. I hit an artery, though what it was doing there I don't know. We've had a bit of an emergency. You're okay though, not too much blood lost, and I've called an ambulance just in case. Ruined your clothes though, I'm sorry. His head spun. He tried to sit up, and in the couple of seconds before he collapsed back to the chair, he saw a blood-soaked body. At least it had pink hands.